Let's also connect then with Dhananjay Sinha, who's with us on the fundamentals. And Dhananjay, as Nikunj put it at the start of the show, we were talking about, mid-cap banks really coming back into favor. But do you believe that for the long haul, while these will, create wealth for investors, it's still the large cap banks that will take precedence as leadership over the long term?
Yeah, I think within the banking sector, what is evolving is that there is very intense competition as far as business is concerned. So if you must have actually seen the commentary of the results of the large banks, be it SBI, ICICI Bank, or even HDFC Bank. They are actually struggling to gain traction as far as corporate lending is concerned. So you see that everybody is actually doing retail lending. People are sort of veering towards taking more risks with respect to business banking, MSME, or even uncollateralized lending. So people are growing their credit cards and stuff. So it's fairly truncated business growth that is happening. So essentially, in that context, if larger banks are actually facing considerable competition, it's quite unlikely that the smaller banks would actually be having a very comfortable scenario. So I think that business outlook for the banking sector is a challenge at this juncture, and this is in the context that interest rates are rising. And earlier on, if you look at post-COVID, banks had gained with respect to margins because they cut the fixed deposit rates dramatically, and the lending rate did not fall as much. So they actually benefited from a falling rate scenario, and the margins were rising. Right now, it is actually reversing. So I think that's part of the business cycle as far as banks are concerned. So I think in the long term as well, I would say that since the banking sector products are not very differentiated, it's kind of commoditized, and your large banks getting into areas where small mid-sized banks have been. So the competition is also lingering on across the spectrum. On the other hand, there has been a considerable increase in the operating costs. So, if you look at the operating costs of most banks, including smaller banks, rising somewhere in between 25 to 30% or 25 to 28%. So, I think that is actually creating a pressure as far as operating matrix is concerned. And what I also noticed is that in the large banks, we have seen the slippages rising, despite the fact that the NPA ratios have still been falling because of recoveries and all. But the slippages, fresh slippages, has been rising for large banks. I think it will be the same for smaller banks as well. So I think in that context, I would say the business growth for banking sector is a challenge at this juncture. You have a credit growth which has gone up to 14%, largely because of rising commodity prices and
The
working capital.
governor, when we met him yesterday, we pretty much asked him the same point, that who's got the right to win? Is it only large banks? He said no. The regulator does not feel like that. In fact, the regulator is of the view that while size and scale is still with the large banks, there are enough and more small banks in India which the regulator feels can become from small banks to big banks, provided they do the right lending and they don't go aggressive in terms of the assessment of the entire lending cycle.